I'm Jean Haskell, conducting an interview for the Marshfield Story Project on June 14th, 2021. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves and talk about your relationship to each other, who you are.
I'm Janet Nielsen, and this is my daughter, Jenny.
Full
Yes,
name?
Jenny Nielsen Warshow.
Good. I mean, hopefully people will be looking at this after, who don't know us.
Right.
Right. So can you say where you live in Marshfield and how long you've lived there?
I've lived there since, 59?
69.
69 on Hollister Hill Road, a lovely address.
And Jenny?
And I lived there until I was 18, and then I built a little cabin just up the road. And 41 years later, it is now a full house.
So you've had family, you've gotten to live next to one another. How nice is that?
Yeah.
So Janet, how or why did you come to Marshfield to begin with? And when?
Goddard.
What year was it?
It was well, you moved up in 69,
69.
but you went to Goddard.
Yeah, I remember going to Goddard. Yes. No, when way back when my mother became the librarian in Upton, Massachusetts, I went to help her when she moved into her job, and we were moving books around and throwing books around, and I thought, this is what I want to do. I want to become a librarian. I had been a secretary up until then. So I applied to library school in Philadelphia, Drexel, and they accepted me, and I took a semester there. And then they figured out I didn't have a bachelor's degree. And so they said I couldn't do any more, couldn't get my degree. So I had heard of a program in Vermont that you could get your degree by long distance. At Goddard College, you only come up for a 2-week residence period, and then you communicate with your instructor by mail or whatever. And so I did that, and it was such a neat place. And my husband was sort of in between assignments for the American Friends Service Committee. They were going to send us to Baltimore. And I said, well, why don't you go up to Goddard and teach there? Because he had a PhD from MIT. They were happy to have him. So we came up to Goddard with Jenny and Ben. And that's how we came here.
And did you move right into the house you're in now?
Well, we looked for a place to rent or buy, or we couldn't find anything, so we decided, what the heck, we'd build our house. So we built a tech-built house, which is architect designed, comes in sections, and we had Fred Fowler, a Nashville guy, come up and build it for us. People thought we
Just
were...
the foundation. You guys built the house part, didn't you?
No, Fred put it together.
Oh.
We finished the inside, though.
Oh.
We put in the wiring. And if I could just say something about it, my husband had his degree from MIT, but when he put in the wiring, later I had some wiring done in the house, and the workmen were pulled off this panel, and they come over, you gotta see this. He had such a wiring mess in there, they were just astonished. But anyway, it's a beautiful house, and we've lived in it all these years, and we've loved it. So that's how I came to Goddard. And I got my degree from Goddard, and then I went to the State University of New York in Albany. I commuted there, and got my degree. I did it in short time, just so that I wouldn't be away from the family too much. And I remember the kids used to eat it with their father at Goddard, and Jenny had this knitted little
Afghan
after,
that your mother had made.
yeah, that my mother made, and it was a coat of many colors, and this guy took it, and Scott spoke to him, and he said, "You took my daughter's coat." And she said, "Yeah, but it was so nice." He said.
It was an ethic of share what you have, I guess, at Goddard, which was pretty loose, right?
But it was the kind of little adventures they had without their mother.
Well, and he said something like, "I'm going to give it to the girl it belongs to," and I said, "I'm that girl." So he had to hand it over.
And how old were you, Jenny, then?
Probably like 3rd grade, maybe.
Yeah, she was in the second
like
grade when we
8,
moved here,
7.
and yeah, probably the 3rd grade, because I had to finish at Goddard.
So you picked up, moved your 2 kids, and
Yeah, and
came up?
never looked back. I mean, I really love Marshfield, and I couldn't imagine living anyplace else.
And you'd gotten that impression from being at Goddard for the 10 days that you would come,
Yes.
and you got to know the community a little bit?
Well, it was, geographically, just, I remember coming up the first winter for one of my cycles, and the snow was so high that you couldn't see people walking. It was really tunneled. And I thought, how do people live up here? But I thought, well, we'll try. And the first thing we did was we bought a snow machine. We were going to be Vermonters, by gosh.
Yeah.
And Jenny, did you ever leave Vermont? Like, you went to school in Vermont, right?
I went to Goddard because it was free, and I left high school early, and they took me early. And we lived in Burlington, but that's still in Vermont when we built the big dam. But I have not lived anywhere since '69 other than Vermont.
So why did you come back to Marshfield?
Well, in 2nd grade, when you bought the land that my house is on, I remember climbing up there and I said, "I'm going to build a house here someday." And but the cabin that I built was supposed to just be a cabin. I didn't have water or electricity or anything. But then John, the person I married, saw it and saw the view, and he was like, "We're staying forever." And I was like, "I don't want to stay in Vermont." He was from Long Island. He was like, "I'm not leaving Vermont." So we compromised and we stayed, and that's what, otherwise I would have gone too. When Ben went, I would have left. But I'm glad I did. It was strange sending my kids to the same school that I went to. That was very weird.
Yeah,
Some
I
of the
do
same
wanna-
teachers that I had, they had.
The same.
Yes.
Wow.
And I was not a young mother. I was 30 or something so I was amazed some of the teachers were still there. But
Right, you'd been out of school for a while.
yeah.
So, did they have different experience than you? And what was your experience?
Well, I remember living in Pennsylvania before we moved up, and we lived in town, and there was the way the neighborhood was, there was an alley that ran down the middle, and the houses, and we had friends on the other side, my brother and I, and we had an amazing backyard with jungle gym and all this stuff, and we would go over back and forth to the neighbors all the time. There were kids to play with, and I could walk to school. And then we moved here, and Ben and I loved the country, but my closest friend was up on the New Discovery Road, so I missed not having people to play with right out the door.
Here.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But my brother and I would go and build forts in the woods and trails, and you loved doing trails and hiking and sledding. Every time we'd come home from school, before you were working full time, you're like, "Let's go sledding," and Ben and I were like, "We just need to sit down for a minute." Like, "No, let's go sledding."
And so what was that you said about Ben?
What was
Did
that?
Did Ben stay in Vermont?
Did I what?
Did Ben stay?
No, he just left as soon as he was 18, and he just took off in a Volkswagen, and he lived in Somerville, and we haven't, he's still in, oddly enough, when he got married, they bought a house in the town that I was brought up in, which was really strange, Upton, Massachusetts, where my mother was a librarian and where I had gotten the idea that I would like to be one. So he's been there ever since, and he's the...
Was that on purpose?
It was
Did he
No, it was-
deliberately do that? No.
It was affordability from Boston. It was the closest to Boston they could be and afford a house. And it just was a coincidence that it was Upton.
Yeah, and I think his wife found the place. I don't know that she even realized that he grew up, that I grew up there.
What
Yeah.
a coincidence. But then you have the country lovers, and Ben is the,
He would like to live in the city. He lived in the city for a while, but now he lives, I don't know what, well, in the small town of Upton.
Yeah.
So describe raising your family here, both of you.
Okay, I will describe Jenny's experience when she went to school.
And this was my classroom.
The room we're sitting in.
Yes. This was Mr. Batten's room.
They sent her home with a note that she was wearing slacks. It was winter, and she couldn't wear slacks because it sounds like like a
Archaic.
Islamic school or something.
Yeah.
And my son Ben's hair was too long, so we were transplants. We were hippies from God knows where, and we came to Vermont, and they weren't ready for us.
No.
But Jenny was the bravest kid. She wanted to take a shop, at, mechanical drawing and stuff like that. And you couldn't do it in those days. You had to take cooking and sewing, and the boys took. So she went to the school board when she was just a kid, and I admired her courage so much to do that. To speak up in front of all those big shots.
As a high school student, when
I think it was junior high.
Junior high?
I went to the principal, Charlie Burbank, and I said, the girls want to take shop. And he said, when women are drafted, you can take shop. And so then I got a petition up and got almost all the teachers to sign it, and many kids, and brought it to the school board, and they said, okay. I think the next year the whole state, changed like the next year for everybody. But
That was because of you.
yeah, yeah,
you were leading the charge.
yeah.
Wow.
But when I was in high school, when I went to the guidance counselor for where to go for college, he said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to do something with design. I want to be creative. I want to do art or design, And he said, well, you can be a dress designer. I always hated, dressing up. I hate, I've never been into clothes ever. So I didn't take his advice.
Well, but it's interesting how far women's rights have come just in our old lifetime. When my first husband left, I was trying to get my affairs in order, and I had a job for, as a head librarian, and
For 10 years.
for 10 years, and
Where?
I applied for a credit
Kellogg
card.
Kellogg Hubbard Library in Montpelier.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And I applied for a credit card, and they wouldn't give it to me because I was a woman. Can you imagine?
This was in 1980 or 81.
So was it different in Philadelphia raising a family? Was it different that way?
Massachusetts, Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania, not Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I remember Ben ran away from home once, and he was in the first grade. I think he actually had some kind of stick, and he put his clothes in like a handkerchief, and he actually put it over his shoulder, and he was away. He went.
Hobo style.
Happily, we caught him before he took off. But like Jenny said, they could walk to school, and that was awfully nice. And it was a whole different thing here to wait for the school bus and deal with the school bus. And they never told me what went on with that school bus, but I bet you had some times with that.
Yeah, there was, yeah. But they didn't harass me too much. For some reason, I wasn't really, because I'd come in second grade, I wasn't a Vermonter, and I was always the new kid, even though I came in second grade. all the way until I graduated.
Huh.
And there was a group of kids whose family had been here for generations, and then there were the Goddard kids.
Yeah.
And the Goddard kids, their parents sent them to the new school, and they came for a few years when they were aged out of the new school, but then they all went off to private school. So I was sort of an in-betweener. I was a Goddard kid, but I didn't go to private school. I didn't go to the new school. So it was a little bit, and people would come to our house, which was very modern. We had modern furniture, and they would be like, what is this? And we didn't have a TV, which I'm very glad we didn't. And we just lived differently than...
We were vegetarians when the energy crisis hit. We tried being vegetarians. And I remember...
Because of the price.
Ben had a friend over. The kid was so afraid he was going to have to stay for supper. We'd have like lima beans or something. So even that's surprising, really, because there were other kids that had Goddard parents, but somehow
They mostly didn't go to Twinfield, though.
oh
They went off to private school or the new school.
oh
Yeah, there were very few of us who actually went
Well,
through Twinfield.
And then what happened with your children, Jenny?
what happened?
With going to school, was their experience different?
Well,
Or
they
weren't the new kids.
They weren't the new kids. They'd always lived in the country, so they didn't miss not having anybody next door to play with. It's a small school, and it depends on really who your friends are. And David did not have a good peer group. He really didn't. And he did not have a good time in school. And Ethan just lucked out and had a great peer group. He had this group of like 8 kids, boys and girls, called the Nerd Herd, and they were just great friends, supportive. And those parents had traveled and done a lot of stuff with the kids, so it was much easier for Ethan. But I should have taken David out of school because it really wasn't the right place for him. But
So they had a little different experience.
yeah.
Yeah.
And now the guy that I'm living with, his son, we're in Cabot, his son is 15, and probably the Cabot school is going to close, and he'll probably go to Twinfield. So a whole other sort of generation.
Another round. So since there weren't many kids to play with, and your friends seemed to be school people,
Right.
How did you work out transportation as a parent? How did you get your children together with other children?
My brother and I were friends with a brother and sister, Crystal and Carl Mead, and they would ride the bus to our house on Friday and stay the whole weekend and go back on Monday. And sometimes we would do that there, but not as much. Do you remember that you used to come for the whole weekend?
I don't remember that, but I remember once him sleeping in the sleeping bag and the gerbil getting away and getting into his sleeping bag at night.
Yes.
That's all I remember about. But they were good friends, though.
Yeah.
And we only had one car, and we were sort of scrimey, so we weren't ferrying the kids here and there and everywhere. So it was a hardship.
It was a hardship.
Did most of the kids do that, go to each other's houses, or?
Well, most of my friends lived down in the village, so I would ride my bike down, and my mother would give me a ride back, because it's all downhill. Didn't want to ride back up, but no, I wouldn't say it was no.
So it wasn't too hard to get around. You could find kids,
Yeah.
but they weren't next door.
Right, and by the time I was in high school, Sean and I used to ride our bikes from Twinfield into Montpelier after school. I would ride to Twinfield from home, and then Sean and I would ride into Montpelier, and then you would give us a ride back. That was exciting, going to the big city.
Which is 14 miles from here.
And you would never let your kid do it now. The road's way too busy.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So raising children then was less or more, describe the...
Yeah, my brother and I would
difference.
go off in the woods for hours doing stuff and riding our bikes all over the place and going off on adventures. And now you wouldn't necessarily do that with your kids.
And you didn't worry about them? They were off in the woods and...
I don't remember being worried about them. I don't remember that.
Mhm.
I was always pretty cautious.
Jenny was a good kid.
My brother was, he would climb up cliffs and stuff, but.
Yeah, he was a boy. But I do remember when they were in the first grade, they started smoking cigarettes.
That was because you and Scott wouldn't stop smoking cigarettes, and so my brother and I and the Fowler kids, we said we were going to smoke. If you guys weren't going to stop, we were going to smoke.
And it did it. I mean, I haven't had a cigarette since.
So that's the second challenge that Jenny has made. I see. Anything else anything you want to describe more about growing up here? Anything? Sports, activities, fads, clothing, best and worst subjects?
Yeah, the things that strike me are, we had fun vacations. We never had any money, but we would go out in the car to head out to interesting places, and sometimes we would get someplace and just then go on the bikes. Like we went to Prince Edward Island and Martha's Vineyard, but my father at a certain point, he wanted to save money, and we got that long roll of plastic we were all supposed to sleep in, and we were supposed to sleep in cemeteries and schoolyards, so we didn't even have to pay campground fees. He got a little bit, but
Yeah.
I think Ben and I refused to sleep in the cemetery.
So you transitioned from Pennsylvania to here pretty
Oh yeah, I mean,
well.
I was young enough. It was mostly that I just missed the kids.
Yeah.
I really missed the kids, but I had good friends here.
Did you have a gang too?
I usually just had one close friend for like a year, and then I'd have next year it'd be a different person. I didn't stay with the same person. I mean, there were only like 30 kids in my class from second grade to graduation, so you kind of went through everybody, and if you weren't a perfect fit, I mean, when I left a year early, and a lot of the kids resented that because I could do that and they couldn't, so I didn't see people for a long time. So even though John and I stayed in town, we made a whole new circle of friends that were not people that I had known in the past. But then as I got older, and with Facebook, I'm now friends with a lot of the people that I went to school with. Enough time has passed that we're just, we're totally different people now.
And what did two girls do, hanging out all day?
We would go and build forts and hike, and I had a pony for a summer. We'd ride the pony and go to the neighbor's barn and build tunnels in the hay, and mostly outdoor stuff. Once we borrowed somebody's dog and tried to keep that a secret that we're keeping a dog. We had to return the dog. We just, I don't know.
So you were building way back when, and then you were doing shop in 7th grade.
I always loved designing things. I had a lot of forts and a tree house. You and Scott built the platform for the tree house, and then I built the little fort on top of it, and I always loved forts. So.
And when you were talking about building your cabin, did you build it?
My father and I built it. It was one of my, at that time Goddard was threatening to close, as it's been doing for 100 years. And so the last 2 semesters I did non-resident terms, independent study stuff, and one of them was building the cabin. That was one of my classes. And I designed it, and we scavenged the material and tore down various different buildings for all the material, and my father and I built it. And
so you did it for credit?
Yes.
Which course? Oh, that was independent study, right? It's Goddard. You
Yeah.
design your own program.
Yeah.
Right.
But it cost $2,000, which was my money from babysitting and lawn mowing and all the money that I'd saved in my life. But it had cost me $2,000, which is pretty good.
And did you know when you were saving? Did you have a goal in mind?
No, I don't think so.
But you knew not to spend it away. You kind
Yeah.
of saved a chunk.
And I'm not sure how I even started. I can't remember why I decided to build the cabin. When I went to Goddard, I was young. I was only 16, I think, or 17. And so I was younger. And a lot of the Goddard students did it in 5 years and, took time off. So they were older. And for some reason, I didn't want to stay on campus. I don't know why. So I would move off into Plainfield to various apartments.
But you did a full residency program, or the
It was
low
a full
residency?
residency,
Okay.
but I didn't live on
But you didn't
campus for
live
most
there.
of it.
Mm.
And so I think at one point I set up a tent on a platform in somebody's field, and I think I just wanted my own little cabin, and then it was a little bigger than I had planned, but then John just loved, you've been there, the site's
Mm.
beautiful, and
Mhm.
so he put in the
Yes.
plumbing and the electricity, so.
So you moved in right away at age 16?
I think we finished it
19.
18 or 19.
Mhm. And by
Yeah.
then you were with John?
Yes, I had been seeing John. I met him when I was 15, and we were on and off. But by the time I went to Goddard after my first year, I was living with him.
Mm.
So yeah, 38 years we were together.
Wow.
Yeah.
Complementary
So-
skills to start out with, for sure.
Well, it was, a challenge at times. But I always say, now that I'm seeing other people, after John died, I dated a few people and I figured, well, I don't know how to do this. I was with someone for 38 years, but you have a whole new set of things. You got to start all over with a whole new person. But I tease the guy I'm with, John and I, it took us 30 years to figure it out, so.
So he's got some time. So, for someone who doesn't live here, how would you describe living in Marshfield and the people here, and, how is it different than somewhere else?
I've lived here all my, practically my whole life. I lived here through my age, so it's hard for me to say how things are at other places, for voting and for community action and stuff like that, because this is where I live. But I'm impressed with Marshfield and how people hang together, and when they get a project going, they do it, and there's people always coming up and volunteering, and we've got a great library here. This is a wonderful librarian, and I think our government, the town government, we've had good select people, but
Yeah.
I don't have anything to really compare it to.
Well, we have town meeting, which you wouldn't have had in Upton, right?
Right.
And I wonder if you could have built a silo home
Mhm.
where you used to live. Seems like there were less zoning then, was there?
When we built the house, there was no zoning.
Okay.
We didn't get any permits at all. So that changed after, but we had no zoning.
And
Right.
wasn't Scott involved in getting zoning? Because I think they wanted to put a ski area on Spruce Mountain, and they were going to put in condos, and the town wasn't really for it. Am I making that up completely?
I remember him going door to door about something. I think it was about zoning, but I've forgotten what it was.
Yeah,
Jeez, I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't remember that.
Mm-hmm. And Marshfield has less amenities than other places, but it doesn't sound like you missed it. It sounds like it's suited to who you are, Marshfield.
Well, I've lived in the country all my life, so I did, for short periods. We had an apartment in Cambridge, and I did like that. We used to be able to walk to the bookstore and to the movies and to restaurants, and I really did like that. But but I don't miss it. This is where I live, and
Rural living suits you.
yeah, this is
Yeah, you grew up on a farm
right.
with an outhouse and no
Right, we didn't have
electricity.
electricity until Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Lyndon Johnson. I just learned this, that Lyndon Johnson is vice president, or some congressperson, I should say. Yeah, this congressperson. He was instrumental in getting the rural farms to get electricity. I mean, we don't give Lyndon Johnson credit for that, but it made the world of difference. My sister and I did our studying in high school by kerosene lamps. I mean, it sounds like Abraham Lincoln. But after the war, they put in electricity, and we had a telephone, we had electricity, it was a refrigerator, we used to have an ice box. I feel like, like a pioneer woman or something, but that I grew up in that.
So what amenities did you have here? You had to have your own water? And
Yeah,
your
we
own-
drilled an artesian well.
And you
and
have
we-
electricity easily enough and a septic system?
But when we came to the energy crisis and environmental issues became important, my husband thought that we should get off the grid. And so he went out west and bought a windmill and made
A used windmill.
a used windmill, dragged it back. And we had that creating the electricity, which sort of shades of back to the kerosene lamps, but and we had a well anyway, but we had to have some kind of connection with a windmill to get the running water. But when we had that windmill, which we had it for some years, I had a wood stove, and I remember once somebody came to visit, and I said, "Would you like a cup of tea?" And they said, "Sure." And I started putting the kindling in the fire, and it just shocked, no, never mind. But we had an ice box, and that was quite we got written up in one of those magazines, I forgot which one now. But
And NBC or somebody came and interviewed us too.
yeah, it was, we were quite the...
Because of the windmill?
Because we were off the grid, we had solar
Uh-huh.
hot water, and we had the silo was designed to be a summer kitchen, and the downstairs part was built around a above-ground swimming pool that we froze in the wintertime, and then it was heavily insulated, and we kept it frozen all summer, and the kitchen was upstairs with a wood stove, and we had a dumbwaiter that went down for a refrigerator that sat on the ice, and because it was too hot to cook in the house. So he had done some interesting things,
Yes.
but then he thought that was too fancy, and he wanted you to move into a cabin with kerosene lights and an outhouse, and you said, "Been there, done that."
So you said energy crisis, so for the camera and the audience, because we're in climate issues now, when was this energy crisis?
Trying to think, put some date, well,
What decade even?
It was in the 70s.
1970s?
it was 83, I think he left. So it was probably the very late 70s, yeah.
I mean, and the house was all electric when you built it.
Yeah, because Eisenhower said it was going to be with atomic power, that the electricity will be too cheap to meter. So we had an electric house. And when this energy crisis hit, the first month, our electric bill was $2,000, and he was only making $10,000 a year. So that's when we switched
To wood, and when we heated with wood.
yeah.
The
wood.
irony, and now we're going to be switching from gas to electricity.
Right, right. Yeah.
So let's talk about the community and, your participation in the community. Tell us about some of the roles and positions you've had in town here. Ways you've been involved, things you've volunteered to do, or
Okay. Well, I've been on the library board.
the Jakewith Library.
Yes, And I volunteered here, but my hearing is so bad now I can't do anything. And I was on the Old Schoolhouse Common board. We managed this place.
To renovate it and make it what it is today?
No,
Or was
no,
it-
that was after that. But when the Historical Society, when Susan so kindly offered this room, then Jenny pretty much designed this particular room. And we used to be down in the basement, and it was a miserable place, and I don't think anybody ever came to see the Historical Society. But this beautiful room, we put it all together with Jenny's design. And
So this is the Marshfield Historical Society was in the building, and now we're sitting in the Hap Hayward
Hayward.
Room, and
Yep.
Hap Hayward was,
Hap Hayward started the Historical Society years ago. He's dead now, but he started it.
right, and it was in the 40s, I think. He was the sawyer here in town. He had a sawmill. And John Johnson and Chris Bellamy were very active in it. And of course, Caleb Pitkin, because his family's been here forever. But when Susan offered this space, Jenny became the head, and we moved here, and John moved to Maine.
Well, it wasn't Susan that offered the space because it was the town. Somebody else had been renting this space, but
So-
it was her idea.
Okay.
And then we cut the doorway through so that you could connect.
so this was not part of the library?
No,
This was a
not.
room all its own in the building?
Right.
And the Historical Society rented it, claimed it?
Yes, well, the town pays for the rent, but it's something voted on a town meeting. So they pay for the rent for this room. There's a storage room back there too.
Mm-hmm.
And we came up with the design for it all. And the Ernie Penley, who was the custodian at the time, was really into it, and he helped David, my son David, and Ernie and I spent, I don't know, 3-4 weeks renovating the space and built the case and everything, and did these doors, and moved the collection upstairs. And the bookcases and those cases, Susan found the Vermont prisons, they have a woodworking program, so they made those cases. We had to pay for them, but yeah, it was fun. And then Michael Troupin, we heard about these two cases. They were down at Norwich University, and we went down there and dragged them back up here, which was no small feat.
I bet, they're huge.
Yeah.
So you were volunteering to do this?
Yes.
And were you involved with the design too, Janet, with Jenny?
No, Jenny designed it, so I was, available for any kind of help they wanted, but they pretty much, Ernie Penley was the honey bunch.
He was a real carpenter, so he knew how to do everything. David and I were just the runners, or, we were helping.
And designers.
And we design, yes. Yeah, but there's a case over there that was in honor of Zula Mears, who was one of the librarians, and so we designed that nook so that case could go in over there, things like that.
So Janet, you were on the board of the Jaquith, so did you shepherd in any changes?
Not that I can remember. But I would like to say that I have given several programs here for the Historical Society. I researched the CCC and cemeteries and the industrial history of Marshfield and Main Street now and before. So I've been active in this, and this is a great place.
So were you part of that walking tour of Marshfield Village that developed?
Yes, I wrote that.
She wrote
You
that.
wrote that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Tracy Hamilton put it together, though. She's a professional. She's a big help.
Yeah.
So was the Jakewith always here? I mean, did it always, oh, it existed in the other building in the village.
Right.
Okay, so,
Right.
and you were on the board when it had moved here.
Was Susanna?
Actually, I was on the board when it was in that building, and
Oh.
I don't know, you probably want to edit this out, but I think that paint job on that library.
The present paint job.
Do you want that edited out? I think
No, I
it's
think you
funny.
can leave it. I just,
Okay.
I feel outraged every time I drive by it. Wow.
Yeah, and you've done many things, right? You helped count votes, you said, and
You know, and I was what do you call it, a poll watcher, to see, you know, that things were run properly, but I mean, I've never been an officer of the town, or my first husband, a guy who had the PhD, he also had a CPA, and he went home once during a town meeting, and they elected him auditor while he was gone. Jenny's father, which he did a good job with.
oh, that's funny.
And you've done a lot of work with the Plainfield Library also.
Yeah, I automated the whole collection of the Plainfield Library, I'm proud to say. When I retired from the Kellogg Hubbard, I was looking for things to do, and so I put all the books into the computer, and I've helped there. But like I say, with my hearing, I can't hear on the phone anymore, so I can't answer the phone, and it's a real handicap.
Yeah. So as head librarian in Montpelier, were you in charge of designing the programs, or what did your job
I was a head
involve there?
librarian at the Kellogg Hubbard
Yeah.
Library, and I was in charge of the whole shooting match. When I got there, the children's library was open from like 2 to 4, which was very handy, you know. So I opened that and put the programs together, and I mean, I had hired some librarian to do, and that really increased our circulation a great deal. And then in the library, the children's library was down in the basement of sort of a moldy place, and somebody, one of our patrons, died and left the library $300,000. I said, well, this is a good time to put a wing on and get the kids out of the basement. And so it ended up costing over $1 million, and Patrick Leahy helped a great deal with that. But we raised the money and made a very, very handsome addition for the children's room, and plus, that was a great time in the library, and Montpelier's lucky to have it.
Montpelier is very lucky to have it. I used it with my child for sure. So who can use the Montpelier Library? So Jenny, as a child and a resident of Marshfield, could she use Montpelier?
She'd have to pay.
Okay.
There are certain towns that don't have libraries, like Berlin and Worcester, and maybe I forgot the others. And they are free, but if you have a town, we never wanted to take away the support from the local libraries, but you're certainly welcome to use it and just, you know, research and all.
Right. So mostly children use like the Marshfield children use Jakewith.
Yes, and that I think is one of the real purposes of small libraries, is for the children. I think it's important for them to have very active children's programs, and Susan does a great job here.
Yeah,
And
and accessible and close by to where they
Exactly,
live.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So Jenny, how about, you've done a ton in town as well. Do you want to talk about the roles you've had, and Stranahan, your
Well, I was on the Cabot ambulance for years. Started off as a emergency care. It was one of those things that town meeting, Sheila, who used to be the president of Cabot Ambulance, stood up and said, we need volunteers, and I think the youngest was in 2nd or 3rd grade, so I now had some time, and so I convinced Annie Reed, to go and take the first class with me, and we were emergency care attendants, which was how I should have stayed there, because you got on scene and I was very good at organizing, like, park here and what do you need, and but then we went on to become EMTs, and I convinced Betsy Chodorkoff to do it with me, and we became EMTs, but then we became responsible for the lives of the people in the ambulance. So I thought if we got more skilled, we'd feel more comfortable. So I became an I-Tech, but then I couldn't call for backup, which I really didn't like at all. But,
So say what an I-Tech is.
I-Tech meant that we could do IVs and certain kinds of drugs. It's under paramedic, but it was as high as you could go at the time on the ambulance. I don't know whether you can be a paramedic now on the ambulance or not. The hired ambulances are definitely paramedics, but
So you said you couldn't call for backup as an
there
I-Tech,
was a
but
whole,
you could as somebody else?
yeah, there's this whole, like, honor
Protocol.
system with the ambulance. My first call that I had on the ambulance after I became an I-Tech was a person had been bleeding and needed an IV, or they were going to bleed out, and I could only find one good vein, and I didn't want to wreck it, so I said, I need someone to come, someone who knows what they're doing to come, and dispatch was like, there's an I-Tech on scene, they can do it. I said, I am the I-Tech, I need someone to come, and they came and they did it, and the guy lived, but I got all kinds of grief for that,
For calling
I
for
brought
help.
shame to the Cabot ambulance for asking for help, and I said, if I can't ask for help, I'm not going to do this. These are people's lives we're talking about. So, but then I got vertigo, and I could no longer go on the ambulance, so I stopped. And then after I'd stopped for a while, I found out that my kids were actually really afraid whenever I'd go out, because it would take about 4 hours on every call, and sometimes it'd be domestics calls, sometimes it would be heroin overdoses, and they were really stressed out that I wasn't going to come back. So I decided that I wouldn't go back to
How
it.
did you find that out?
I can't remember
After you quit,
now.
did they offer that?
I think I was also on the Plainfield Fast Squad, and one of the guys, Greg Light, came to try to get me back on, and I think my kids at that time said, don't do it. It was really stressful, so I didn't go back on. So.
When we were talking about Marshfield and the community, one of the things I noticed is there aren't a lot of amenities of shopping and movies and but there's the fire department, there's EMTs, there's the help you have, and the personal and intimate level of that, and people who mostly know everybody anyway to begin with.
Right.
Feels like it makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Was it like knowing a lot of people you were
It
working
was,
on
yeah,
with?
and I knew how to get to people's houses, which was, if you only have 6 minutes to get there, you need to know where they live. And,
Right.
and people were comforted by having a woman coming in, and it was, every time I would go to the call, once I became in charge, I'd be just like shaking the whole way, because I didn't know whether I was going to be able to save this person's life, And I was very lucky on the calls that I went on. People were either wasn't that serious, or we got them to the hospital alive. The couple of people that were not alive they weren't alive when I got there. So they didn't die on my watch.
Right.
I did CPR on a number of people. We actually got one person back doing CPR, but
Now, was your father as having done, he do CPR, was it CPR he
My
did?
father?
Yeah, were you talking earlier about he took some kind of training?
no, CPA.
Oh, CPA accounting.
CPA,
Oh,
yes.
okay. A little different.
Yeah.
Don't expect him to say more.
Yeah. No.
And E911 hadn't come in yet either, had it? Or
It was right around that time they had changed all the addresses. So yeah, yeah.
did that make a difference for the drivers?
We had maps. Lois, the town, the Marshfield Post woman, actually did the 911 map for Marshfield, and I had a copy of that map so we could look it up when the dispatcher called out where to go. But like Maple Valley is technically in Marshfield, and the gas station across the road is in Marshfield. So we would get calls, they would say, to Marshfield, and Barry Town would come to Marshfield, but they had to go back to Plainfield, so that was, the borders are sort of strange. But I think the first, Chloe Pitkin got me, asked her husband to ask if I wanted to be on the DRB. No, it was called wasn't called the DRB then, Development Review Board. It was called, I can't remember what it was called. It was called something else then. And they wanted to know if I would be on that. And that was when I was pregnant with David, so that was 30 years ago. That was my first town thing that I did.
Did they already know that did you get architecture training?
I did, I'm an architectural designer. I'm not an architect, I'm an architectural designer. And, but I had done that before the kids were born. But it was funny, you had to get interviewed by the select people, and they were like, why do you want to be on the DRB? I can't remember what it's called. And I said, I don't, you guys asked me to do this. I said, okay, you can be on. But
That was easy.
Yeah, but I was on that for a long time. The Plainfield ambulance, my mind is a blank. The Stranahan Town Forest, John and I worked very hard to get that organized.
And it didn't even exist as a town forest until
private.
you...
Well, it was private land, and the woman who owned it had wanted to put it in the land trust, but she got a brain tumor and died before she could do it. And then it went to her kids, and it just sort of sat there for a long time. And then somebody was interested in buying it, I think, and contacted the family, and so then they put it on the market for, I forget, 1.6 million or something. And so John got the land trust to remind the kids that their mother wanted to preserve it. So they reduced the price to, I forget, 400,000 or something.
Wow.
And Kate's house got separated off. She bought that separately, and the weaving school. But I raised, I forget, like $130,000 from, it was 100 different families in the area gave money for this. And then I think it was the Vermont Housing Conservation League, they gave quite a bit of money too. But over 100 families gave over $100,000. And I thought, that's pretty impressive.
Wow. And so did the town match it?
So the land trust, the money was given to the land trust. The land trust bought it, and then they gave it to the town. It didn't cost the town a penny. It was didn't cost the town a penny. But then, of course, once it became town property, certain people in town said they were losing taxes, which was like $2,500 a year in taxes, and it was costing so much money, and people couldn't afford to pay their taxes, and this was a huge burden. And so then they wanted to log it to make money, and somebody gave the false impression that you could get $1,000 an acre for logging it, and there's 500 acres of woods, so they thought we could get $500,000 logging. And we did one logging job, and we got, I think, $4,000, and then we put another 100 acres out for bid. The town did, and nobody even wanted to do it. It's not good land for logging, so.
Well, it brought in revenue because it was sugaring.
So
too.
so we have a lease for sugaring, we have two leases for haying, and so we're like, I don't know, $500 short of what it would have been through taxes. So
And who makes all those decisions?
there's a Stranahan committee, and I'm on that committee, and it's an advisory committee. The select board makes the actual decisions.
So when you raised the money, you knew it was sort of going to be given over and
Yes.
not something you could...
The kids wanted it to be a memorial. That's why it's the Virginia Stranahan Memorial Town Forest. And we didn't realize the town forest, the wording town forest is a historical term. Towns had town forests where people could go and get firewood. And we would have called it, the Virginia Stranahan Memorial Park. or something. We should never have called it town forest. That was just accident.
So does that get it legally into a
No,
different
but
situation?
everybody, there are town forests all over, so now everybody, that was also one of the things that, so it's been a struggle to keep it. Because the 100 families wanted it for enjoying nature. You guys probably gave money, yeah. And you gave money, and I gave money. I mean, we wanted it for nature. We didn't want it to be logging and, commercial. So it's been a bit of a struggle. But there's now a really good committee that seems to be pretty dedicated, and the select board is, I think, supporting us at this point, so.
And
that's
who
good.
made all the ski trails? Did you get involved with that, Janet?
Not the trails, but I would just like to interject that we live very close to the parking lot, and it's amazing how many cars there are parked to use that property. No, Jenny did the maps.
Yeah,
The maps made.
Annie Reed and Bruce McDonald and Diana, who used to be at the Marshfield Inn and Motel, we were the trails crew, and we went in like 2 days a week for the first fall, and mostly we just cleared existing logging roads and old roads. There was 1 or 2 trails that we put in, but and then I GPSed it all and made a map and put the map out and got a grant for $20,000 to fix up the road and put in the parking lot. My father built the sign with me, the kiosk, and we put that up. But after John died, there was a person in town. I did a survey of people in town, handed it out to everybody to say what they wanted for the future of the forest, and this person got to be in her bonnet that it was going to be a park. It was just a park for the rich elite and not for anybody, and that we were keeping it as our own private park. And so I had her over, and I said, look, yes, it is close to my land, but we put in a parking lot, and we blazed all the trails, and we made maps so anybody can come and use this. And she's like, oh, well, I didn't know that, but she had gotten this petition together for the town to get me thrown off, get me thrown off the committee, because so
Didn't like the direction you were taking it.
but she didn't know. And I said, now that you know that the actual facts, that we have made it as accessible to anybody as possible, can you go and talk to the select board? And she said, oh, I'm not going to do that. That's up to you. So we went to the select board for like 6 months, and I was able to stay on the committee.
So against some odds. Wow.
Yeah.
So you really have done a lot for the town. Are there other
Yes,
things?
I'm proud of her.
Yes.
And now I'm back on the DRB again. When I got on the my mother convinced me to be on the Historical Society board, and John at the time said, if you're going to be on the Historical Society, then you got to be on the Development Review Board again. So I'm still on the Development Review Board.
So
again.
do you have things to do with like the Martin Bridge or the Orton Barn or anything?
No, this is all building permits that aren't the standard building permits come through. Like if it's commercial or you can't build it to the normal setbacks or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Zoning Board of Adjustment. That's what it used to be called, Zoning Board of Adjustment. Yeah, and for the Historical Society, when we got between the Stranahan and the Historical Society, I researched the deeds for the Stranahan property, because there were 6 house sites back there, and I thought, oh, this will take me a couple days. I was in there for 6 weeks, 4 days a week doing, you helped me with that. I had 275 deeds, and I didn't get finished all the research on it, because there were over 100 people lived there for over 100 years. So
In the land that was the Stranahan,
Yeah.
and you had to make sure the deeds were clear?
no, I just was curious who lived there, when they moved there. I just wanted, and I was going through the agricultural records, what they grew, and I just wanted to get a history. I mean, it was a whole little community down there. What were they doing down there? Why were they there, and why did they leave? And I didn't finish, John died and I stopped, but I'll go back to it and finish it.
Are you going to document it somehow?
Well, I was hoping, this display of Hap Hayward was supposed to be temporary back when I had energy before John died, and we were going to change the display every 6 months, and we were going to move Hap over into this display case, so he would always be there, but so we were going to do one on the Stranahan and whatever else, but I have not had the energy to do it.
So that may or may not come about.
I think I'm starting to get energy back. I think
yeah.
I'll do it.
You've got a few projects going on. Do you want to talk about any of those?
No.
No.
But so my cabin, my original cabin that I built when I was 18, we added on and we added on and we put on a barn and we did this and we did that, and I love granite. And years ago, people would be burying old barn foundations, and I'd say, "Can I just pay you to truck it over?" And there was a guy who did stonework really cheap, who, I don't know if he does it anymore or not, but John would come home from work and there'd be this new pile of granite. And it's like, oh man. But so we have a lot of gardens with granite and all. And there was a person over there helping me plant a tree the other day, and she was like 25 or something. She said, "This is a really nice garden." She said, "Well, I've been working on it for a while," and I thought about it and I realized I've been working on those gardens for 40 years. And I thought, how did that happen?
Wow. And do you have, I hope you have some photographs from over time.
Yeah,
That'd make a good
yes.
documentation
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, and my son loves it there. I've been living in Cabot during COVID because he's been living at my house, and he loves it there. Now I have to try to pry him out so I can get back. Yeah.
So talk about how Marshfield has changed in the time from when you first came here to now.
Did you have many Goddard friends when you first? Who were your first friends when you came to town?
God, don't ask me questions.
Okay, well, what about your women's group?
Oh, yeah. Well,
When did you start that? And who was in that?
Well, we started a women's group. This was in the days of women's consciousness raising, and so they were pretty much faculty, either faculty members or faculty wives. And we had that going, and then it changed a little. But we had a great time for many, many years.
And you had another woman librarian in the group, right? There were two of you who were librarians on Hollister Hill Road, no?
Was Linda?
Oh, Linda Goldberg, yes, bless her heart.
Was she part of your group?
Yeah, Linda, Helen Rabin, Corin Moulton,
Mary?
Mary Leahy.
Uh,
When you started that group, nobody was 40. You were the first one to turn 40 in that group.
Mercy.
I
How
know.
can you expect me to remember that far back?
And you only stopped, half the people have moved away, but you only stopped in the last 10 years. You did that for a long time.
Yeah, we did.
Every week.
Yeah, it was.
What did you do?
We talked about, we'd have like a topic, I remember, we talk about our mothers, we talk about our fathers, we talk about, one thing or another. It was,
Women not wearing slacks to school.
well, really, can you imagine a kid? And the boys wore slacks, but the girls were supposed to be bare-legged.
Right.
I never could figure out but it was a certain principle that was pretty conservative that didn't stay too long after we came here. Not that I'm responsible for not being here.
Has Hollister Hill changed?
Oh my goodness, yes. If I were an original Marshfield person, I would resent it. There are so many new houses on Hollister Hill, and they're all, they're not families building. It's outsiders coming in and bringing a whole new attitude. But really, Vermont's been very gracious about changing. When you think that used to be a rock-ribbed Republican state, and then it changed during the time when the rest of the country was changing, and bringing in Goddard with all those strange people, and they were very accepting. I remember, people just were kind. They never.
And it wasn't, no matter which political party they were in, right? It was still for independence, was a value here.
Yes, they were very nice to us. I can remember a couple of incidents where hippies were poorly treated, but by and large, they were very kind to us.
And didn't you do a conference for women back in the
Well,
70s?
Yes, but that was just a one-shot thing.
But it was a big conference.
Yeah, it was a statewide conference, but
Oh, but
I know.
I mean,
Janet, you
don't ask me.
really have done a lot. What in your mind, what are you most proud of?
Oh, well, being at the Kellogg Hubbard, it was really, really wonderful. And of course, that isn't Marshfield. That's
But it's you and you're a resident.
yeah. I really love that. It was a great, and I started the reading discussion series there, and alas and alack, they didn't continue them when I left. But for 26 years, or a little less, we would have, we'd have like 50 or 60 people come in and who have read the same book and discussed it. It was the absolute reason, for libraries. This was what we're for, to get people to read good books and to talk. It was
And to be a community around that.
yes,
Yeah.
that was.
Really, yeah.
But I was proud of my work with the Kellogg Hubbard Library.
Right. And weren't you the chair of the Democratic Party for Marshfield?
Well, I still am.
We still are? You've
But
done
it's,
that for
with
years.
this virus thing, it's been pretty quiet. We haven't had a meeting for a long time.
Yeah.
We haven't had a meeting of the Historical
I know.
Society.
We should start again.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah, so you want to say something about how you adapted to a year of 14 months of COVID?
Well, I've just gone crazy, that's all. But I mean, it's, just the little things that we used to do to give a little interest to our lives, because I'm retired, and I really miss that. I've read a lot of books. I've done a lot of crossword puzzles.
Are you a technology user? Did you get on the computer to see people?
I look at Facebook and I check all the news stations, which I really shouldn't do. It's so depressing.
But Zoom is not really an option because of our hearing.
Right.
But the president's reading group that you started with Mary, you did that with Zoom, didn't you do that with Zoom?
Yeah, we did that. Yeah, we did that. We had
During
several
COVID?
meeting of Zoom. Yeah.
And what is it that you did? What is it?
Well, we started. The point was, have you ever wanted to read a biography that was so big and fat that you couldn't do it? But if you joined the group, then you'd be encouraged to do it. So we've been doing this for quite a while now, and we've come right down to the end of the presidents. But
So you were reading biographies of all of the
Presidents.
U.S. presidents you could lay your hand on?
yeah, or
Yeah.
selective, and we might have to go back and fill in some gaps. But we had one of the members is technologically with it, and he set us up at Zoom, and it worked. Zoom's done a lot this last year. They certainly had a big year.
Yeah.
But we just had a meeting Saturday. We met in person, so we're back to
Your
normal.
first meeting in person, all
Yeah.
right.
Oh,
So,
gosh.
wow. So what about you, Jenny? How has Marshfield changed in your lifetime? Things you noted.
Well, I mean, Goddard had a huge influence on the area. And just the difference between Marshfield and Cabot, who Cabot has some influence from Goddard, but not the same kind of a thing. It's interesting.
What did the influence, what was the impact?
just a art and broader picture of life.
You mean like, so it brought people here who did those things?
Yeah,
or-
and just, I mean, it just showed the kids that I was going to school with, you know, like, you could actually leave the state if you wanted to. You could go, and, I mean, I was in the drama club in school, and we went to New York City, and there was a kid, we took the train down, and there's a kid who had never left the state, never been on a train, never been on an escalator, never been on an elevator, never been in a city except for Burlington. Like, and we went to a Broadway show, and we went on the subway, and they had never done any of that. So there was quite a, I don't know. I mean, just that, but the politics, it's just a totally different kind of a bubble. When John and I built the dam in Winooski, the hydroelectric dam, or renovated it, because it was actually built by Ira Allen, we lived in Burlington for a year and a half when David, my youngest, was a baby till he was 3. And I remember going to like play groups and stuff, and I just assumed everybody was a Democrat because everybody here was a Democrat, you know. And I had been hanging out with this family for a while, and I realized that they were Republicans, and I said, "You're a Republican? You know, like, what's wrong with you?" You know, and they were totally nice people, and I mean, it's just such a different bubble here than there is in other places. And
So-
now Burlington is much more. It's much more liberal up in Burlington also, since Bernie and everything.
Right. Is
but-
Marshfield mostly Democrat? I don't have those statistics, though.
Oh, alas and alack, no, they vote for, I'm really impressed that they vote for Republican out there.
Yeah.
They're rock-bound Vermonters here.
But I remember.
So we have a mix.
We have a mix, but people, I remember.
Your crowd and the
People would be
you know.
voting, I forget who, I think if people, when you were counting votes, you'd say they'd vote for Bush and Bernie and Leahy on the same ballot. So people were voting for the people, not by the party.
Yeah.
So,
So that another sign of kind of independence is a value.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
be who you are, do what you want to do.
Just a lot of very creative people.
Huh.
And I don't know.
That's true. When you think of people like Rick Winston,
Oh, yeah.
what a influence he has had in Avram Pratt, and yeah.
Yeah. We had.
And you're
basic-
saying that Goddard, having brought these people,
Yep.
and then these people and who they were and what they did,
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
contributed to the community
Rick
and gave
Winston-
it a different flavor.
Didn't go to Goddard. He went to Goddard, but he didn't pay. He was like, I think he said something about he just started going to classes, and they were like, okay. I think I could have that completely wrong, but he had a film series in Montpelier.
And Ben Koenig, he
Yes.
was an ADP with me.
Yeah.
Well, he started the Independent Film Theater.
Right, but before he had the Savoy, he had a film series,
Oh.
the Paramount, not the Paramount. What was the Pavilion?
Oh,
Yes.
right.
And behind, I mean, and we had tickets, season tickets. We just went to everything.
Yes.
And that really affected my life, going to his movies.
Yeah.
We didn't have a TV.
Right. And was the theater here? Did you participate in that?
I was more doing sets and design and lighting. And
For,
for Twinfield, I was only involved with Twinfield.
okay. Because what was the one in Montpelier?
That's what I forgot. That's what I wanted to be. I wanted
Lost
to be
Nation.
I
Yeah.
wanted to be a set designer.
You wanted to
in high school, when I went to the guidance counselor, I wanted to be a set designer. And
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about your sort of professional, semi-professional, whatever
Oh.
life?
Well,
so you wanted to be a set designer?
I wanted to be a set designer, and he said I could be a clothing designer. And so I sort of had it with Twinfield by the end of 11th grade, and I only needed 1 year of English to graduate. And so the school board said if I got a year of English anywhere, they would give me my diploma. So, and Goddard, I applied to Goddard, and they took me early.
They have an early year program?
No, they
No?
just took me early. So I did a year of English at Goddard, and so I did get my diploma. I didn't go to graduation, but I got my diploma. But at the time, I thought I wanted to be a math teacher. And so I was studying education. But when I graduated college, I was only 19, and I was too young to go back and teach high school math. So I taught adult basic education with Mary Leahy. And
Well, you went to Vermont Tech too.
well, I really wanted to be doing design, something design. And I worked at Bear Pond Books for a couple of years. And it was while I was at Bear Pond Books, I think John showed me the architecture program down at Vermont Tech. They had just started a 2-year program. So I went down and I did like a year and a half of that program. And then Norwich started their program. And so I was going to become an architect, but the insurance with architecture is life, for your whole life. They can sue you for your entire life. And I didn't really want to get into that rat race. And insurance at that time, this was in the early 90s, it was like $20,000 a year, which meant you would have to be making, so much money just to be paying your insurance. And I really didn't want to get into that whole thing. And I worked, so I did, but in Vermont you can design private homes without a license. And I worked with about 3 different teams of carpenters where I would meet with the clients, figure out what they wanted, draw it all up, and then they would figure out how to actually build it. I never gave them the technical stuff. I did the
The design, but
the
not
design.
the blueprints.
Right. I did blueprints, but not the structural. I didn't say, I didn't tell them how to frame it or anything like that. They did that. And then John got Parkinson's and needed me to help him in the office with his stuff. And so I stopped at that time and worked with John for the next 8 years
Wow.
till he died.
Do you want to say anything about the dam or that project?
Well, in Plainfield, he was a big no-nuker, and he wanted, he just thought it was really dangerous. And there's a lawsuit, State of Vermont versus John Warshow, you can look up. And when he would go to demonstrations, people said, what is the alternative to nuclear power? And so he and Matthew Rubin got into hydro as an alternative. But ironically, the same people that had been demonstrating against the nukes were then demonstrating against the hydro in places. He was like the big dam in Winooski, there we had a big crane out there, and this guy climbed it in the middle of the night, unfurled this banner saying, "Can you hear the salmon scream?" But he misspelled salmon, and the fact of the matter is, Ethan and Ira Allen had built that dam, so the salmon had not been able to come up the river forever. And John and Matthew put in a fish elevator so that the salmon could come upstream for the first time since European settlers. So
Did that calm the restless natives?
no, there was just a certain group of people that just wanted to complain. And but before he went into those projects, he wanted to, in Plainfield, there's a dam, hydro site, an old hydro, and he wanted to develop that. It belonged to the town, the money would go to the town, everybody's tax rate would go down, and the town said, yes, great. And this is when Carter was president, and he got all the permits and everything. And then there's one member of town, Kitty Hardy, who thought it was a communist idea, and got a petition together that they have another town vote, which passed. Everybody still wanted it because their taxes were going to go down. But Carter was no longer president, and the grant that John was going to do it under expired, so they couldn't do it. So they never did that.
Jenny, you have faced some challenges from early on to.
So then he went and did the Wrightsville Dam, which was bought out by, I think it's Washington Electric bought that before it was built. And then he took that money and did the East Montpelier one, and then the one down in Springfield, and then the big one in Winooski. And then we were starting into windmills when he got sick and couldn't do those. But we sold all the dams, thank goodness, right before he died, and reinvested in solar. So I actually have 13 solar sites around the state. Half of 13 solar sites around the state.
Wow. And did you have to do a lot of negotiating? And
That was all done before John died. So, and John was sick he was going to continue as partner, but he couldn't. His partner was the person running it at that point.
Which is.
And so I've just taken
not
over.
running.
I just am owner, but don't run it.
So he transitioned, he knew he had to transition, he knew
Yes.
he was
Yes.
gonna die.
Yeah. Well, no, he didn't know he was going to die, but the Parkinson's was just going to get worse and worse, and he was having trouble with memory and all kinds of things. So he just needed. We were going to travel. We actually bought that camper that I have 6 weeks before he died, and never got to go with him.
Did you use it at all?
Oh yes, I've been going every year. Yeah, I love my camper. But yeah.
Good. So then you lived out of town for a little bit, and now you're.
Well, I was at my house, and then I met the guy that I'm with now, and he has a young son, and he has 50-50 custody, so every other week we have his son. So we were living in Cabot when we had his son, and at my house when we didn't have his son. But then I had cancer, and he helped me through chemo, and so at that point I moved to his his place. And then we had just starting at my house again when COVID hit. We'd been there like 2 weeks.
So what did you do to adapt to COVID?
Well, then we went back to his house, and it was hard because his son was in school, and he played basketball with other schools, and they weren't testing the basketball teams. They were testing the hockey teams, but not the basketball teams.
And you were high risk. Were you
and
in
I was high
treatment
risk.
at that point?
I was done that, but I was still compromised, and it was hard. Also, his son went back to his mother and every other week, and she was much more casual with everything. And so then Neil would, it was hard, very hard on the relationship.
Sounds like a nerve-wracking year.
It was not. Yeah, and my doctors are all like, "No stress."
Did you get approved for earlier vaccination?
No, because I still have the effects of chemo. I still have it, but it had been long enough that I was not. But when I finally went in, at the hospital, they're like, "You should have done this months ago. You should have been on that list. That's outrageous that you weren't on the list." So I don't know.
But you're all vaccinated now and resuming life as usual.
It's just such a relief now. And now when I go someplace and you have to put a mask on, it's just like, now it's annoying again. Whereas before, if I went any place and they didn't have a mask on, I'm like, I'm not going in there.
Right.
So it's such a relief. But it's funny, Brad asked me on Mother's Day if I wanted to go to Sarducci's, and we were both fully vaccinated. But Sarducci's on Mother's Day is a very busy day, and we had not gone anywhere, and I was like, I can't handle that. I was like, how about we go to Hardwick on a Tuesday? Let's start with that.
Put our toe in the water.
Yeah, that was funny.
So you too, you've done a lot. Is there any particular thing you're most proud of? Or
The
invested in?
Stranahan. I mean, that if we can keep it what people wanted it to be, I think that's a great thing. That's really a good thing. And I like this History Center. I think it's really pleasant.
Yes, this is a funded room.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. This is where people will come to sit and use computers and look at these interviews if they want to, as well as online.
Right.
Yeah.
You still awake, Paul?
Oh, yeah. I'm definitely taking a back seat, so I won't distract.
Yeah.
So, future, you're not going anywhere, it sounds like. You're staying in Vermont. And Marshfield.
I can't imagine
Yeah.
where I would go.
Yeah. The compost heap eventually.
Are there any questions you'd like to ask each other?
What did your parents think about you moving to Vermont?
In those days, I think people were more independent of their parents. And it was like when you got out of high school and if you weren't going to go to school, you got a job and you know, moved out. And so when we left, I don't think it was, you know, a shock, because nowadays parents have their kids with them for a long time, but in those days we'd move out and get a job. And
Was
make-
Vermont did it feel like a faraway place to your parents?
Oh, well, I'm sure they weren't happy to have me move that far away, but they weren't the kind of people that were very demonstrative, you know, so.
Did they visit you here?
What?
Did they visit you here?
No, we visited them.
They came up a couple of times, but not much. And then when your mother got older, you brought her to live with you.
Yes, she broke her arm, so we brought her with her cat to live with us, and Jenny was a big help with that, but
You were still working full-time.
I was, and my mother was, whether it was Alzheimer's or dementia or whatever, but she'd start wandering around, and Jenny would find her sitting out there on the.
I found her lying down in the garden, and it was cold. I mean, it was, you know,
Yeah.
there wasn't snow on the ground, but I would go down and get her lunch and check on her, and I when I would find her lying down, I would say, "Got to get you up," and she'd be like, "Well, just don't tell them that I'm on the floor. Just leave me here. Just don't tell them." I'm like, "Well, I am them, you know." And I was going to look at a house over on I forget where it was, but that I was working on, and I said, "Do you want to go for a ride?" And so I drove her over to this house that was kind of a funky house up on this long driveway, and she didn't get out of the car because it's very hard for her to get around. But when we were coming back down the driveway, at the base of the driveway, there was a cemetery, and I said, "So what did you think of the place?" And she goes, "Well, at least the cemetery is convenient."
And you have two sons. Will either of them stay in Vermont?
I think David will. He has an apartment in Burlington, and I think if he finds a partner, he would like to stay. But Ethan's in China. I don't think he'll ever come back.
He's in China.
Yeah, he's been there quite a while now. He's bought a condo and everything, so, yeah. So I doubt he will ever come back.
Hmm.
So, but David really likes it. David likes being around.
Right.
And he's gotten very used to my house, and I
And
have
what's
to-
his profession? What does he do for work?
Well, he almost bought the Daily Planet in Burlington right before COVID. And it was like a signed thing, but something didn't quite work out and the deal fell through, thank goodness. So, so he's just been hanging out, you know, he hasn't been working full time.
But he'd like to do something like that.
I'm not sure what he wants to do. He's sort of an inventor type. He's kind of, you know, one of these kids who did like Dungeons and Dragons and those kinds of things, and so they've been doing it online. But there's this game called Magic, which I had never heard of, but there's like 7,000 Magic cards, and apparently you can't get a proper case to put them in. So he has been working designing cases to put these cards in, and he's one of those. He just likes fixing things. He built a shop in my barn, and he's got a little apartment up above the barn that he's building the kitchen in right now, and he just likes building stuff.
Huh. So he'll have a place to be when he comes visit.
Well, I made this little space for him to get him out of the house because I didn't know how long COVID was going to go on, and I love having him around, but I want to be back in my house. I really need to be back in my house. And but now, of course, we're finishing it right as COVID's over, so I'm not sure what we'll use the space for, but he loves to do everything. He's, you know, gardens, cooks, hunting. He just got a chainsaw. He's taking a chainsaw class. I mean, he just loves doing everything. He's just into everything.
Well, the technology too. He's Mary Leahy is losing her sight, and so David set her up with the Kindle so that she can get the print
Make it
bigger.
big.
Yeah, and that kind of thing. He's very
Yeah.
generous with his time to do that.
Yeah, with Chloe Pitkin, her computer wasn't working, so he got her a little tablet that was, all she had to do was like push a button and it connected, would say, "Who do you want to call?" And it was like 3 people, and connected that for her so she could do that.
Oh, that's pretty
Yeah.
special.
Yeah,
Wow.
Yeah.
And did Ethan ever develop his
language.
Yeah, language. Is
I think it was his senior study in college. And I think he's teaching English as a second. He's teaching not English as a second language. When he first went over, he was working in a private high school. That apparently the Chinese want to send their kids to school in Australia to college, and so he was working in a school run by the Australians to prepare the kids to go. But he was teaching them English, but like advanced English, because they already knew English because other cultures know English. They're much more advanced than this country. So I don't know.
So what else should I be asking? We'll wrap up here, but is there anything that has come up? Any memories or projects or anything about anything that you want to comment on?
I'll just say I've been impressed by Jenny's accomplishments sitting here listening to her life story. That's very, very good.
And Janet always came up with great trips as adults. That's not me. I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
I think that's the library. But she wanted to go and walk the Camino de Santiago.
Part of it.
When she was 75, she was just going to head out with her backpack.
When you were
I
young.
bought a backpack.
And I said, no, we don't speak the language. So I went over and we walked 100 miles.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
You went too.
Yeah.
You went?
We had a
You
good
did
time.
it at
It was-
75.
At 75.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we did the
The Erie Canal.
Erie Canal.
We biked the Erie Canal. That was another one of those things. Well, she said, we'll just head over there, and it'll be fine. There'll be places to stay everywhere. And we got there like 5 o'clock. We get on the bikes and we start biking, and it was like hours later. There was no place to stay. We finally pulled somebody over and we said, somebody was walking. We're like, where can we stay? And they said there was a inn. So we went over to the inn. It was getting dark at this point, and there was a big bus parked out front, which is a bad sign with big tourist bus. And we went in and they said the only room they had left was the honeymoon suite. And I said, well, how many beds does the honeymoon suite have? And the guy goes, how many beds do you think the honeymoon suite? But we stayed there. That was funny.
Yeah, that was a good trip too.
So that was 2 mother and daughter trips, just the 2 of you.
Just the 2 of us.
Now, Janet,
Yeah.
you said before the camera was on how old you are. I don't know if you want to share that.
How old are you?
88.
Yeah, so this was when you were 75, when you were young.
Yeah.
But you're still walking every day, aren't you?
Well, I try to, but I remember on the Camino there, somebody said to me, that's remarkable, you're still doing this, or something. I mean, big deal. Gee whiskers.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and we were walking 9 to 12 miles a day.
Yeah, which I couldn't do now. But then we tried the C&O Canal, and that
Yeah.
was a
Where's that?
disaster.
Going into Washington, D.C. from Cumberland, Maryland.
Oh.
Yeah,
Oh.
the old railroad.
But you didn't have your pacemaker yet. You
I
got your
didn't,
pacemaker right after that.
I needed a pacemaker for sure. Plus, we rented bicycles, so it was one of those bikes you sit behind,
Oh, recumbent.
instead of like this where you get real power. So at one point, I said to Jenny, just let me lie.
Lying on it rained, it was raining,
Yeah.
and it would be 30 miles between towns, and there
Yeah.
was no place we could get any food or anything. Ethan came with, and he went over the handlebars the first day, and his steering wheel, his handlebars were all bent, so I took his bike, and I'm like, and then she just like, she lies down and in the rain and the wet grass, she's like, just leave me here. And you quoted that Civil War thing, just leave me here to bleed a while. What is that?
Oh,
You said-
right. I'll bleed it. Some general said, I can't remember, but I'll bleed a while, then get up and fight some more.
That's what you said. We had 10 more miles to go, and you were like, just leave me. No.
So did a pacemaker allow you to have more
Oh,
energy
I use
afterward?
it 100%. when I go and they check it, and sometimes they just sort of turn it off to see, and I just feel like, oh. So every time I go, I say, do not turn it off. No, that keeps me alive.
For her,
And-
it was slowing down when she exercised instead of speeding up.
And
I
this
don't
was,
have a,
at what age did you get it?
It was after the Camino, and it was after the CNO. It was
Yeah.
after the Erie, because
Oh, I've had it probably about 9 years, because the battery, it lasts for 9 years. Can you imagine? I mean, I have hearing aids and the batteries last a week. My pacemaker lasts 10 years.
That's
Yeah.
good.
so
But-
you got the pacemaker, and then like 3 days later, we climbed Nichols Ledge.
Oh, well, that really keeps me going.
So you're still hiking and walking?
Well, I try to, but I mean, I used to walk 3 miles a day, but I only walk 1.5 miles now.
And we did the Bailey Hazen Road.
Oh, that was wonderful, yeah.
That was your
Oh,
idea.
and that's an old battle road, is it? In Vermont?
It was a military road that they were going to, that George Washington would use to invade Canada. And they were almost done, and they figured, well, if we can invade Canada, Canada can invade us.
On the same road.
So maybe that's not such a hot idea.
So
so
how
we-
long is the road?
Oh, we would.
We
I mean-
started in Wells River, and we got to Hazen's Notch.
That's the end of it. I mean,
Yeah.
we did the whole thing.
And how long did that take?
Well, at that point, we were only going 8 miles a day.
But was that at like?
I think we did it over a week.
Yeah, it was about a week. It starts in Wells River, it ends in Hazen's Notch. And that was great fun.
And did
Yeah.
you stay overnight somewhere, or did you drive back to where you left off?
We took 2 cars every day from home, and we would park one car at the end, and then we would drive around. We didn't want to go on the Bailey Hazen Road. We'd drive around and leave it at the beginning, and then walk to the car, and then drive back and get the other car. We did that because
Yeah.
it was the middle of nowhere. There was nobody to give us a ride or anything.
But that would be a fun thing to do, if you could get a van or something with people to be picked up instead of
Yeah.
spotting the cars.
Yeah, it went through Peachum and Craftsbury.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was
And it's
beautiful.
amazing that never became a populated road. You'd think, in the old days, because they graded it, and but it's still rural.
And is it flat, like is it along a train line, or is it
No,
hilly?
it's just regular roads in Vermont, mostly dirt. There's some paved roads, but we never, even on the paved roads, there was hardly any traffic.
But at one point, it was through the woods. It was a snow machine trail, and we were going through the woods, and it was like a Walt Disney scary movie, And we finally got, was sort of getting dark. I think we got to this bridge, and it said unsafe bridge.
It was, after the storm, there was some huge storm. It had been washed. It was like
Yeah.
sideways, covered
I
in
said,
ice.
I'm going to swim this river. I don't
There was
care.
there was
I'm
snow on
getting
the
outta
ground,
here.
but the path had been totally washed away, and there was all those boulders we climbed
Yeah.
down to this bridge, and then we climbed. We just like went across with our fingernails to get across
Yeah.
that.
And we came wandering out of the woods, and these people were logging there, and I think they were trying to figure out what the heck we were doing there. No, that was a fun thing.
And we had parked our car at the far end, and the 2-car things. But we asked a farmer if we could park up there, and we thought we were only going to be gone like 3 hours. And I was just joking, like, if it gets dark, come looking for us. And it was dark. We were lucky the guy didn't come looking for us. Yeah.
What fun! Do you intend to continue doing this kind of thing?
Yes, I wish there were other projects like that we could do.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping to get her out in my camper this fall. Go travel with me for a while in my camper once you close camp.
Sure.
Yeah,
But I do snore, so I don't know. I'm going to have to bring a tent or something.
that's okay.
Or she'll have to bring noise-canceling headphones.
Right. Yeah.
Well, how wonderful! That's inspiring. I wonder, my mind's going like, start a a website, let people know what they can do together in Vermont, mother-daughter trips.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, I've never really been on the, had any trouble with Jenny. I mean, she's always been a good friend.
You've always gotten along, huh?
Yeah, which is
She
nice.
wasn't a bratty teenager? Or...
No, she was never, never gave me a hard time.
No, we've always gotten along really well.
Yeah.
And your father still lives around here? Because he helped you do the thing?
My
on
father,
the map? Yeah.
he lives down in New Hampshire.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
But
he's,
so he came up to help you make that.
well, he was
map.
still living with my mother at the time.
Oh,
They
when
were, they split up right after we built, right after I built my cabin, they split up.
Oh. Okay, I thought he helped you do the thing for the parking lot for the,
Oh, he came up and helped me, yes, that was
Okay.
like 8 years ago or 10 years ago or something. Yeah, I mean, he comes up and helps with things now and then, but yeah, he likes to have a project when he comes up.
I like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, great. It was, I'd say, I'd call it a wrap, huh? And it's, so guess what time it is?
11:30?
11:10 of 12.
12.
Oh, we
Did
went
it go
overtime.
fast? Did it go fast? Or did
Yeah,
it go
it did.
fast?
Well,